Hello and welcome to our viewers in Nigeria and around the world. I'm Jeffrey Uzonga. The program starts right now. President Bola Tinubu proposes the acquisition of land for ranches and livestock after receiving the report of the National Conference on Livestock Reforms. Federal government inaugurates 15-member interministerial committee to oversee the nation's 63rd independence anniversary to reflect the bravery and sacrifices of national heroes who fought for Nigeria's independence. The governor of Abia State, Alex Otti, charges security operatives in the state to step up their efforts and fish out those behind the killing of a member of the Labour Party, Mr. Maduka Zakari, in Izikwato local government area of the state. Thanks again for joining us on Lunchtime Politics live from Channels Television. We are broadcasting from Lagos. Begin our tracking of the polity from the nation's capital, where the president has promised to reconstruct the Eleme axis of the East-West Road following a request by some stakeholders from Rivers State who had paid him a visit. The stakeholders were led by Governor Siminalayi Fubara, and others in attendance included the FCT Minister and former Governor of Rivers State, Mr. Nyesom Wike, some officials of the Niger Delta Development Commission, and traditional rulers. The president appreciated the delegation for their support during the election and highlights the importance of the state to the nation's economy.
By the executive governor of Rivers State, His Excellency.
All I can do is pledge to work hard and pray to God to put me on the right path, not to disappoint any of you. Yes, we've been through democratic twists and turns. I've made history with you in support of my ambition. Rivers is the nerve center of our economic activities. Housing to our refinery, housing to our several oil blocks, housing to our pipeline activities for the sustenance of the economic activities of this nation. They are extremely important in the scheme of things for all of us. You have shown commitment, resiliency.
The national anthem.
Approving that very, very valuable investment, $14 billion by Indorama Petrochemicals Company in Rivers State. The promise to revamp the Port Harcourt refinery, and indeed for the appointments of eminent Rivers sons that have been made into the federal government, led by Nyesom Wike, our former governor who is now the minister of the FCT, Ajuri Ngelale, the president's spokesman, and members of the Niger Delta Development Commission Board and the Southeast Development Commission Board. So we are grateful to the president and also have come to assure him of our total loyalty and support. This was just, as I say, solidarity and thank you visits. The only issue we raised in our speech was the state of the East-West Road leading to the refinery. And we did mention that that would enhance the movement of petroleum products when the refinery at Port Harcourt comes on stream. As you say, it was protest. Protest is a right. As a lawyer, I recognize that. The minority will have their protests, and the majority will have its way. The minority will have its way. It's normal. We're in a democratic society. But let the federal capital and Nigeria see the president has the prerogative to make an appointment. And he has exercised that prerogative. And all I say, let Nigerians see whether the president's appointment was justified. And I can assure you, with the performance which we expect from Minister Nyesom Wike of the Federal Capital Nigerians will be happy that the president made that choice.
Those were the reactions from the senior advocate of Nigeria, Onweze Okocha, after meeting with President Bola Tinubu, the delegation from Rivers State. We are going to stay in the nation's capital. Efforts by the federal government to end the protracted farmer header crisis in the country are being stepped up as the president says his administration will acquire land for ranches and livestock production in the country. President Bola Tinubu said this at the presidential villa in Abuja during a meeting with members of the National Conference on Livestock Reforms as well as heads of security agencies in the country. During the meeting, the president received the report of the National Conference on Livestock Reforms, which calls for the establishment of the Ministry of Livestock. Our State House correspondent, Emperor Simon, reports.
After a successful outing in India and the United Arab Emirates, President Bola Tinubu is back to face home-front matters. On his itinerary for the day is this meeting with heads of security agencies, members of the Committee on the National Conference on Livestock Reforms, Mieti Allah Cattle Breeders Association of Nigeria, MAGBAN, among other stakeholders. The president is concerned about the inefficiency in the livestock sector and the challenge posed by farmer herder crisis in the country.
Ranching is the answer. We can create a huge economy out of the situation that we say problems. Instead of utilizing what we have for the benefit of mankind, the populace area, we let it loose on organized crime. It is not the fault of others or farmer. It's our fault in leadership. Not finding solution, immediate, path to solve a problem. Leadership is about thinking and doing.
He is, however, quick to mention the solution his administration is bringing on board.
I will be talking to all the governors. The federal government is ready to acquire land for ranches and livestock development.
The report of the National Conference on Livestock, which was set up under former President Muhammadu Buhari, was presented during the meeting. The conference made 21 recommendations which provide a holistic approach to livestock production in the country. The national chairman of the All Progressives Congress, Mr. Abdullahi Ganduje, who hosted the conference when he served as governor of Kano State, gives some details of the recommendations.
We recommended for the establishment of Ministry of Livestock and subsequent agencies so that various aspects of the recommendations will have appropriate institutions for implementation.
As long as the triggers of the conflicts are not addressed, you are likely going to continue to have a recurring decimal. And what are the triggers? Primarily, the typical livestock herdsman is always in search of food and water for his animals.
The committee is optimistic that its recommendations will assist the government in tackling the issue of farmer herder crisis once and for all. From the presidential villa, Emperor Simon, Channels Television News.
The farmer header crisis in Nigeria is quite an old or ancient issue, if you want, and we're going to explore that issue just in a moment. But for now, we'll head to Ibadan, the Oyo State capital, where the governor is making a statement during the commissioning. He's commissioning a road project in that area. Let's take a listen.
34.85 kilometer Oyo Iseyin Road. With industries moving to these areas or expanding their operations because of the infrastructure, we quickly increased our IGR and generated funds to do the last mile roads. So here we are today to celebrate another milestone. When this project commenced in July 2021, we had an expected completion date of July 2022. However, the construction of the Ogun River Bridge caused delays, and we had to recalibrate our expectations. But we're here now, and with the joy I can see on the faces of our people, all is well that ends well. As I mentioned earlier, this 34.85 kilometer Oyo-Isanyi road has high economic significance, not just to the people of Oyo and Isanyi, but to the entire state and region. The fact that it is a federal road highlights its importance. But as we will find out as we move on to inspect the former Fashola livestock farm, this road hosts one of our biggest assets in Oyo State. Our first agribusiness industrial hub, which I have been told will be completed in about a month or two, is domiciled on this route. I do not want to preempt what we will be seeing there, but going by what I have been told, our vision of creating an industrial hub in this zone is becoming a reality. We already have at least 5 agribusinesses operating out of the hub, and we should expect more. Our vision is to have an agro-tourism site here, and I'm looking forward to seeing the Ministry of Culture and Tourism work with the Oyo State Agribusiness Development Agency to make this place a tourist destination in the shortest possible time. I look forward to seeing what horizontal synergies can be created between the ministry and Oisada to achieve this. And ṣé kí n já yín sí gangan? Kí n já yín sí? I have nínú Fashola nsìn, èmi náà ti ní, mo ti nílé kan bẹ̀. So tó bá di ìgbà Christmas, ibi tí màá ti ṣe Christmas nìyẹn, my next birthday.
The governor of Oyo State, Seyi Makinde, speaking ahead of his guest, who is former President Olusegun Obasanjo, who will be inaugurating that road. And I'm glad he mentioned the fact that he wants that area to be some level of, to have some level of agro-tourism activities, which is taking us back to the conversation that we were supposed to have just before he came on board concerning the farmer header crisis. And joining us to discuss the farmer header crisis and other security issues is Mr. Mike Ejiofor, who is the former director of the Department of State Services. Mr. Ejiofor, thank you for joining us on the program.
Thank you for having me.
Now, there are postulation as to what has festered. Before we go to some of the proposals that the president has put forward, let's just backtrack a bit, because there are postulations as to what festers this farmer header crisis in Nigeria, because it dates back to, say, the pre-colonial era where the barter system was created by the colonial masters or the people in agreement at that time for migration route, more like a system where there's a migration route. But all of that blew over in 1970s or in the 70s over issues of lands by both parties, whether the herders or the farmers themselves, along that migration path. So looking at this, isn't this a case of ancient crisis or conflict with modern players?
Yeah, no, I wouldn't think so. Even though in those days we had a grazing routes, we had grazing fields, and we didn't have the kind of problem we're having now. But like you said, in the 70s, when all those grazing routes and all this were abolished, the herders had to look for alternative means, of going to feed cattle. And by so doing, they destroy other people's farms and crops. That gave rise to this. So I think talking seriously, even though I don't have the details of the recommendations made by the committee. One of them, which is of course establishment of grazing field, and I think it's quite commendable, and it's going to check this issue of farmers' headers clash to some extent, and I think it should be encouraged if the government can go ahead to implement the recommendation of creating the Ministry of Livestock, which will be more specialized, especially in terms of looking at the farmers' headers clash, especially within the middle belt, particularly in Benue and Plateau states, where these crises are very, very high.
So for you, do you think that, you've mentioned it, but do you see that as some level of a silver bullet if a special ministry is now created? Because I guess these are the things that necessitated the creation of things like the Niger Delta Ministry, the Northeast Development Ministry, depending on what was obtainable. So is this like a silver bullet in your view?
Well, you see, the problem is what we need is solutions. If you create the ministry we already have, some of them need to be made because of cost of governance. And we're still coming up with new ministries. As long as it helps us in solving our problem, I don't think there's anything wrong with it, because it will be a specialized ministry. Like you talk about Niger Delta Ministry, even though we have a Niger Delta Development Commission, we have the Northern Development Commission in Borno and all those things, they tend to kind of reduce the tension, in especially the Ministry of Niger Delta and Niger Delta Commission. So if we have another Ministry of Livestock, which is specialized in addressing the issue of farmers' clash, I think that will go a long way in solving this problem, because it's affecting us economically. There's no food for the people, because farmers cannot go to their farm. The headers too are not even making progress because of several clashes. So when these things are separated, I think it's going to give us a lot of leverage.
Most of the time, we need to critically look at the issues in terms of diagnostics to be able to proffer solution. The little I know about economics is that sometimes when you put out a model and it doesn't work, doesn't mean that model is wrong. It may be that you are appropriating that model in a wrong situation. Excuse me, positing it in a wrong situation. So, let's look at some quantitative issues. For instance, climate change has been part of the reason, like you mentioned. Population density has created its own challenge, but there may be other qualitative issues, such as, I don't know whether you agree, whether mutual suspicion within the polity itself is playing a critical role in stoking this crisis.
Yeah, you see, both of the problems are political and economic. The owners of the land want to acquire their land. The headers want to feed their land. So I think if we are able to separate and let them live harmoniously, it's going to help us. So the issue of whether, the economic problem, for instance, is affecting us. Don't forget that Nigeria was relying on agriculture for its economy, maybe 70% in the pre-colonial and post-colonial era, before the advent of oil. So there will have a lot of potentials in agriculture, and we must harness this and bring these people together so that the country can move forward. Especially, like you talk about climate change, a lot of issues, the lakes are drying up where all these headers feed their cattle. The grasses are no more there. And so if we have a grazing yard and grazing fields where there is concentration of efforts, where the ministry will...
All right, it means to be having some... Mr. Jafar, are you there?
Yes.
We had some maybe network issues from your end. If you can repeat what you said, just briefly.
Yeah, what I was trying to say before a call came in is that, the headers during the pre-colonial and post-colonial era, Nigeria relied heavily, maybe 70% of its revenue on agriculture. But that is not the case anymore. Since the advent of oil, everybody diverted. And we started importing rice. We started importing, I remember, cattle down to the south, the trade and all these areas. So we have, we need to harness all this harmonize the relationship between the herders.
Mr. Ejiofor? Mr. Ejiofor, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Oh, okay. Well, I don't know. Maybe we'll just try and see as much as we can take. Just before we let you go, because we seem to be having recurrent network issues. This is not the first time certain propositions have been made. I heard the president talk about the federal government will collaborate with the states to acquire land for ranches and livestock development. The former president, Muhammadu Buhari, also made a proposal for Ruga that sparked all kinds of controversy. Now, the argument has always been that livestock is a private business. And so they're wondering why the federal government is getting involved. Or if to douse attention, is federal government also going to reciprocate that gesture for the farmers? I don't know your thought. How is this going to play out? The government says it will acquire land for ranches.
There is a need for collaboration between the state and the federal government. Don't also forget that the issue of land is vested in the governor of the state. And if they must establish ranches, the state government must provide the land for the ranches. And we had ranches even during post-colonial days. And I don't see anything wrong with reintroducing the ranches so that the cattle will not be roaming the street, destroying farms of the people. And the farmers also will have the chance to concentrate.
Just before I let you go, Mr. Ejiofor, because of time, I mentioned the fact that those who are against it, like they were against the Ruga, are saying that acquiring ranches and all of this, that livestock is a private business.
Yeah, that's true. It's a private business, but again, the government needs to support farmers and in achieving our food sufficiency in the country. So I don't see anything wrong with that. But when it becomes a political reason, the Ruga was attacked because of his political effect as at that time. But now that it's affecting our security and there's need for people to come together, I don't see anything wrong with that.
All right, Mr. Ejiofor, that's a good place to anchor it. We wish we had more time to have this conversation. In terms of other statistics, we wanted to play out for you to respond. But unfortunately, that's all we have time for. Thank you so much for coming on the program, Mr. Mike Ejiofor, former director of the Department of State Services. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Thank you for having me.
Let's now move on the program to other stories and to core politics, where the governor of Bayelsa State, Mr. Doyediri, says his governorship campaign is not against the All Progressives Congress, but against its candidate. The governor said this at the government house during an enlarged caucus meeting with Nembe leaders, where he also announced the 25th of September as a kickoff date for the campaigns by the People's Democratic Party.
The chairman of the People's Democratic
We start our campaigns on the 25th of this month. We are going to campaign with issues, an issue-based campaign. In Nembe, you are going to tell them that we are doing a road from Nembe to Brass, which your own son was here for 5 years. He couldn't do, collected money on top of it. To his own Brass, he didn't do. In Nembe Basambri, we constructed a road, a concrete road, via the local government. And several others that we have done through the House of Assembly members that we call constituency projects. So let them also come and tell us what they have done. That is how politics is played. It's not to abuse people. It's not to tell lies. I've told all of us, and I'm telling you, we are not fighting APC. If you are going out to campaign, don't go and abuse APC. APC members, leadership, they are all in support of UPDP. You know why? They brought a bad candidate. Your son is a bad candidate. He's an unsellable candidate. We are not actually fighting APC. We are fighting Timipre Silva.
Clearly, some direct shots there from Doyodiri. Ahead of the nation's 63rd independence anniversary, the Secretary to the Government of the Federation, Mr. George Akume, has inaugurated a 15-member inter-ministerial committee to oversee the celebration. Speaking at a brief inauguration ceremony in Abuja, Senator Akume, who was accompanied by the Minister of State for the FCT and other officials, said the celebration affords an opportunity to reflect on the bravery and sacrifices of national heroes who fought for the independence of the country. And let's head to Abia State, where the governor of the state, Alex Oti, has condemned the killing of a member of the Labour Party in the state, Mr. Maduka Zakari, in Isikwato local government area by yet-to-be-identified assailants. In a statement released by Special Advisor on Media and Publicity, Ferdinand Ekoma, Governor Oti describes the murder of Zakari as barbaric and vicious and has called on security agencies to ensure that the perpetrators are brought to justice. He also promised that the government will stand by his family and give them all the necessary support required. Mr. Zakari was the Labour Party campaign manager in Uturu area of the state during the last general election and was said to have played active roles as a community leader in fighting crime. We head north, where Bauchi State Governor Bala Mohammed is advocating for the fair distribution of the country's revenue. While making a case of Bauchi, the governor says the state is receiving limited share of the federal allocation and the sharing formula needs to be reviewed, putting into consideration some of the available indices. He was speaking during an interactive session with delegation of the Federal Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, led by Mr. Kabere Usman, a federal commissioner, who also commended the state for prompt tax remittances to the federal government. And that's it on the program for today and the week. So thank you so much for your time and, of course, your usual company. I'm Jeffrey Uzama. You've been served on Lunchtime.